Jasmine Vega was known on the base as a quiet force, someone who moved through the maze of military logistics with a sharp mind and steady hands. A civilian contractor stationed at Fort Monroe, she handled shipments of supplies that ensured soldiers had what they needed to carry out their missions. No one questioned her work. She was meticulous, and her reports were clear, concise, and accurate. Her days began early and ended late, but Jasmine didn't mind. She believed in what she did, and though she wasn't military herself, she felt connected to the mission. Yet, beneath the calm routine, tensions brewed. The base had been struggling with budget cuts and whispers of theft for months. Several high-ranking officers were under pressure to tighten security and accountability. But the problems only seemed to grow. Jasmine had noticed irregularities in shipment logs and flagged them discreetly to her supervisor. She expected a thorough investigation, but instead, she received cold stares and vague reassurances. Something wasn't right. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. Jasmine was sitting at her desk when a group of uniformed officers appeared at the entrance to her office. The senior officer, a stern-faced major named Clint Redford, looked at her without emotion and handed her a sealed envelope. "You're being removed from the base effective immediately," he said curtly. "Gather your belongings and leave." Jasmine's heart sank. "Why? What did I do?" she asked, voice trembling. "Those are not questions for you. The decision is final," Major Redford replied, turning away. Confused, hurt, and angry, Jasmine blinked back tears. She packed her things in silence, the usual hum of the base suddenly deafening. Colleagues averted their eyes. No one offered an explanation or even a word of support. It felt like she had vanished into thin air. Her badge was deactivated, cutting off her access to the base, and even the small apartment she rented on the grounds. She stood at the base gate, clutching her duffel bag, watching the familiar rows of buildings recede behind the fences. The place she had considered a second home was now a prison she was locked out of. The morning sun felt colder than usual, casting long shadows over the parking lot. She wanted answers, but no one was willing to give them. Rumors began to circulate. Some whispered that she had made a costly mistake. Others claimed she was involved in something far worse. Jasmine didn't recognize the woman painted by hearsay. She was no thief, no saboteur. She had only done her job, and done it well. Days later, stranded in a cheap motel off the highway, Jasmine scoured her emails and notes, searching for clues. The discrepancies she had flagged weeks earlier were still bothering her. Shipments worth millions had been logged as received, but the goods were missing. Someone was stealing from the military, and she was the only one brave enough to notice. Or so she thought. The more she dug, the clearer it became. Her removal was no accident. Someone high up wanted her gone, fast, and without a trace. One name kept coming to mind: Colonel Mitch Alvarez, a retired officer she had met during a rare base inspection months earlier. He had offered her unexpected kindness and advice in passing. "If you ever find yourself in trouble, call me, no matter what." With nothing left to lose, Jasmine reached out to Mitch, hoping he could help her understand the storm brewing around her. As she waited for his reply, a deep fear settled inside her. What had started as a simple job had turned into a battle for her own survival, and the truth might cost more than she was ready to pay. Jasmine's phone buzzed late at night. The screen lit up with the name she had hoped to see: Colonel Mitch Alvarez. Relief washed over her. She answered quickly, her voice tight but hopeful. "Mitch, it's Jasmine. I don't know what's happening, but they kicked me off the base. No explanation. My badge is deactivated. I can't get through to anyone." There was a pause on the other end before Mitch's calm voice came through. "I've seen this before, Jasmine. When someone gets too close to a secret, the system pushes back hard. You need to stay safe and keep your head down for now. His words did little to ease the knot tightening in her chest. Jasmine had no choice but to trust the man who had once been a high-ranking officer. "I'm stranded at a motel," she said. "I don't know who to turn to." "Good. Stay there. Don't try to go back to the base. I'll look into things and get back to you." Jasmine hung up, feeling more isolated than ever. The base, once a place of purpose and routine, now felt like a fortress with walls closing in on her. The silence from former colleagues was deafening. No emails, no calls, only cold indifference. She sifted through her files, hoping to find something concrete, proof that would explain her sudden exile. Her hands trembled as she opened a folder marked Supply Chain Audit. The numbers didn't lie. Millions of dollars in equipment were unaccounted for, missing without explanation. What was worse, the records had been altered, dates changed, invoices edited. Jasmine's pulse quickened. She remembered the email she had sent weeks ago to Major Redford, warning of the discrepancies. It had been ignored, even buried. Had she unknowingly become a threat? Someone who saw too much? The pieces started fitting together. Her eviction was no random act, but a calculated move to silence her. Yet who would benefit so much from the theft that they would risk a scandal? In the cold light of dawn, Jasmine felt the weight of the conspiracy settling on her shoulders. She had stumbled upon something dangerous, a hidden web of corruption entwined with powerful people on the base. The motel room, with its thin walls and flickering fluorescent light, became her war room. She printed documents, copied emails, and organized her evidence with methodical precision. Her resolve hardened. She wouldn't run. Not now. Not ever. Days passed without word from Mitch. Jasmine feared the worst, but then another call came. Mitch's voice was grim. "Jasmine, they're covering their tracks fast. Files deleted, witnesses threatened. Whoever's behind this knows you're onto them. Then what do I do?" Jasmine asked, voice barely a whisper. "Keep quiet, but prepare yourself. I'm pulling some strings. If you're right, this goes higher than we thought." Her mind raced. If this corruption reached beyond the base, if it involved senior officers or contractors, then she wasn't just a scapegoat. She was a beacon threatening to expose a dangerous truth. At night, when the motel's fluorescent hum died down, Jasmine stared out the window at the empty parking lot. The world outside seemed indifferent to her plight. But inside her chest, a fire blazed. She remembered the advice Mitch once gave her during their brief encounter months ago. The system isn't always fair, but it's the brave who can make it better. Brave. Could she live up to that? With her future uncertain and the past closing in, Jasmine knew one thing. She couldn't face this alone. But who else could she trust when even the walls seemed to be closing in? As dawn broke again, a plan began to form. She would reach deeper, dig harder. The silent walls around her might try to trap her, but she was determined to break through, because some truths were worth the fight. Colonel Mitch Alvarez had served at Fort Monroe for over 2 decades before retiring last year. He knew the base's ins and outs better than most. When Jasmine's call came, it stirred something deep inside him, a mix of old loyalty and frustration. He hadn't forgotten the young civilian contractor with the sharp eyes and quiet determination who once caught his attention during an inspection tour. Sitting in his modest home office, filled with military memorabilia, Mitch began his own investigation. He sifted through public records, discreetly contacted old friends still on the base, and pieced together what Jasmine had uncovered. Millions of dollars in missing equipment and altered records. He recognized the signs immediately. Someone was orchestrating a cover-up, and Jasmine was the whistleblower being pushed out to keep the secret safe. Mitch's voice over the phone was steady. but urgent. Jasmine, what you're facing isn't just office politics. This is systemic corruption. When the stakes get this high, people do desperate things to protect themselves. Jasmine swallowed hard, fear mixing with resolve. How deep does this go? Farther than you realize. I'm pulling some strings to get you some protection, but you have to be careful. The moment they sense you're fighting back, they'll try to silence you permanently. She listened as Mitch described the network of influence woven through the base. Contractors, officers, supply chain managers, all connected. And the money? It wasn't just missing supplies. It was lining pockets and feeding into schemes that could bring down careers and lives. Jasmine's mind raced back to Major Redford, the man who had dismissed her so coldly. Mitch didn't hesitate. Redford's at the center. He's been guarding the gate and helping the thieves cover their tracks. But there are others involved, some higher up. How do you know this? Jasmine asked, disbelief and hope mingling. I have sources. Old contacts. People who owe me favors. But we have to move carefully. This isn't a simple audit anymore. It's a battle. Jasmine realized the weight of what she'd stumbled into. She had thought she was just doing her job, uncovering an accounting error. Instead, she was facing a powerful enemy, determined to protect a dangerous secret. Mitch's next words echoed in her mind. If you want to fight, you need proof. Solid proof. Document everything. Email copies, phone logs, receipts, anything. That shows the pattern. And don't trust anyone on the base. Not yet. Taking his advice to heart, Jasmine threw herself into gathering every piece of evidence she could find. She hacked into archived files, compared shipment logs, and cataloged suspicious transactions. Every late-night search brought her closer to the truth and deeper into danger. Meanwhile, Mitch made discreet inquiries, reaching out to former colleagues, lawyers, and even journalists who specialized in military corruption. He warned Jasmine to stay put, but also to prepare for the unexpected. Sometimes you need an ally inside, someone with authority. Jasmine felt the weight of isolation pressing down on her. Her friends had stopped calling. Her supervisors ignored her pleas. But Mitch was different. He believed in her, and that belief was a lifeline. One evening, as she stared at the sprawling data on her laptop screen, Jasmine received an encrypted message from an unknown sender. We know what you're doing. Stop now or face consequences. Fear gripped her, but she refused to back down. Instead, she forwarded the message to Mitch. He responded immediately. This is serious. They're watching. But this also means you're on to something. 4. The first time since being kicked off the base, Jasmine felt the tide might be turning. She wasn't just a victim. She was a threat to those who thought they were untouchable. Her fight was no longer just about her job. It was about exposing the truth. No one dared to speak aloud. And with Mitch in her corner, she wasn't going to stop until justice was served. Brigadier. General Richard Nolan was a man of discipline and unwavering principle. His reputation for fairness and tenacity preceded him, earning respect and fear in equal measure throughout the military ranks. When his office received an urgent, confidential briefing mentioning Jasmine Vega and a possible whistleblower on Fort Monroe, Nolan's interest was immediately piqued. He recalled meeting Jasmine months ago during an unexpected base inspection. She had been quietly efficient, meticulous in her work, and possessed a calm resolve that struck him. Now, hearing her name associated with a shadowy scandal involving millions of missing dollars and internal sabotage, Nolan knew he had to act in fast. In the vast Pentagon headquarters, Nolan's calendar was packed, every hour accounted for by briefings, strategy sessions, and diplomatic meetings. Yet he made an executive decision to clear his schedule for a surprise visit to Fort Monroe the very next day. If corruption had infiltrated one of the military's vital installations, It was his duty to root it out. "I want full transparency," Nolan told his chief of staff. "I'm coming down personally. Find her. I want to know what she knows." Back on the base, the news of the general's unplanned arrival sent shockwaves through the ranks. Officers whispered nervously in hallways. Major Clint Redford's face went pale when he heard Nolan was coming. Redford had orchestrated Jasmine's removal, confident his actions would stay hidden. But now the entire house of cards threatened to collapse. Redford immediately convened a private meeting with his closest allies. "The general is asking questions we're not ready to answer," he said, voice low but tense. "We need to cover our tracks fast." Meanwhile, Jasmine was still at the motel, unaware of the turmoil her name had ignited. Mitch Alvarez called her late in the evening. "The general's coming. Things are about to change." Jasmine's heart raced. After weeks of isolation and fear, she wasn't sure if she was ready. But deep down, a spark of hope ignited. Maybe someone in power would finally listen. The next morning, General Nolan stepped onto the base with quiet authority. His eyes scanned the operations center, absorbing every detail. He held a meeting with senior officers, questioning them sharply about reports of irregularities and the sudden dismissal of Jasmine Vega. Then, with a voice that silenced the room, he asked, "Where is Jasmine Vega?" The room fell into an uneasy silence. The officers exchanged glances, avoiding direct eye contact. Redford's jaw tightened. He was caught off guard. She was removed for a policy breach. An officer stammered, trying to stick to the official story. Nolan was not convinced. "Is she under investigation?" "No, sir. She was asked to leave due to security concerns," came the hesitant reply. Nolan's gaze pierced through the evasions. "I want her brought here. Immediately. No exceptions." The order was clear. A search was launched to locate Jasmine and bring her to the base under the general's authority. Redford's attempts to stall faltered as the weight of Nolan's command left no room for delay. Hours later, Jasmine was escorted back onto the base, her badge reinstated and security clearance restored. She walked through the gates, no longer an outcast, but a key figure in a high-stakes investigation. The eyes of the entire base were on her as she entered the operations room. Some looked away, others whispered. But Jasmine held her head high, her courage renewed. General Nolan approached her quietly. "Thank you for standing up. We need to hear everything." In that moment, Jasmine knew the fight was far from over. But for the first time, she was not alone. The tide was shifting, and the truth was about to come to light. The atmosphere inside Fort Monroe shifted the moment Jasmine Vega returned. No longer a ghost erased from existence, she was now the focus of a brewing storm that threatened to unravel the carefully constructed facade of the base's leadership. Major Clint Redford felt the walls closing in. His once confident demeanor cracked under the weight of General Nolan's scrutiny. Jasmine was immediately granted access to classified records and audit files. With Mitch Alvarez assisting behind the scenes, she began poring over mountains of documents, cross-referencing shipment logs, invoices, and supply manifests. Patterns emerged, dark and unmistakable. Millions of dollars in military gear had vanished, replaced by falsified reports and doctored paperwork. She uncovered evidence that went beyond simple theft. Contracts were rigged, vendors were complicit, and several mid-level officers were in on the scheme. It was a well-oiled machine of greed and deception, hidden behind layers of bureaucracy and intimidation. Redford's attempts to hide evidence became frantic. Sensitive files disappeared, computer logs were altered, and witnesses were threatened into silence. But the general's arrival had disrupted their plans. Nolan ordered an immediate internal audit and appointed a special investigative team to work alongside Jasmine. "Bring me everything you've got," Nolan instructed. We will find the truth. Jasmine's heart pounded as she laid out her findings during a tense briefing. Her voice was steady, but the gravity of the situation hung heavy in the room. This is not just mismanagement, she said. It's criminal. Equipment worth millions is missing. Lives could be at risk if soldiers don't receive the supplies they need. And those responsible have been covering their tracks for months. Several officers shifted uncomfortably. Redford remained silent, knowing the noose was tightening. The base's leadership tried to resist at first, pushing back against the investigations, but Nolan was relentless. He demanded full cooperation and threatened severe consequences for anyone obstructing justice. Meanwhile, Jasmine found unexpected allies among the rank and file. Soldiers and civilian workers, tired of the corruption, began coming forward with information. Their courage gave Jasmine strength. She was no longer fighting alone. As the days passed, the scope of the scandal widened. Investigators uncovered evidence of kickbacks, forged signatures, and black market dealings. The once pristine reputation of Fort Monroe was tarnished. Redford's fate became inevitable. When confronted with irrefutable proof, he broke down, confessing to orchestrating the cover-up and implicating several others. His arrest sent shockwaves through the base. Despite the mounting pressure, Jasmine remained vigilant. She knew the battle wasn't over. Powerful figures still loomed in the shadows, and the threat to her safety was real. General Nolan personally ensured her protection, assigning military police to guard her movements. Your bravery saved this base, he told her, and you have my full support. Jasmine's courage inspired change. New protocols were implemented to prevent future corruption, and oversight committees were established to maintain transparency. For the first time since her dismissal, Jasmine felt a sense of justice, yet the victory was bittersweet. She had been betrayed by those she trusted, and the scars of the ordeal ran deep. Still, as she stood in the operations room, surrounded by officers now committed to reform, Jasmine knew one thing for certain. Silence was no longer an option. Truth was the only path forward. Her fight had exposed the darkness hiding within the base, and it was just the beginning. The weeks following Major Redford's arrest were some of the most intense in Jasmine Vega's life. The scandal that had erupted at Fort Monroe had drawn national attention. Investigators from the Department of Defense were now involved, combing through every transaction, every shipment, and every document related to the base's operations. Jasmine was at the heart of it all, her name appearing frequently in reports and headlines as the whistleblower who refused to be silenced. But the battle was far from over. Jasmine faced threats veiled and direct meant to intimidate her into backing down. Anonymous calls, suspicious vehicles parked near her motel, and whispered warnings at night became part of her new reality. Yet, she refused to be broken. General Richard Nolan remained her steadfast protector, ensuring her security detail was uncompromised and that she had access to legal counsel. This isn't just about the base anymore, Nolan told her during one of their meetings. It's about setting a precedent. Your courage will echo beyond these walls. The military community, once wary of Jasmine, began to shift in her favor. Soldiers and civilians who had witnessed irregularities but feared retaliation now spoke openly. Jasmine's perseverance had cracked the veneer of fear, empowering others to come forward. At the same time, she was called to testify before a congressional committee investigating military contracting fraud. The spotlight was intense, but Jasmine's testimony was clear and compelling. She spoke of the cover-up, the stolen supplies, and the personal cost of standing up to powerful interests. Integrity is the backbone of our armed forces, she said, voice steady despite the weight of the moment. When that integrity is compromised, it's not just numbers lost, it's lives. Back at Fort Monroe, reforms were underway. New oversight boards were established, transparency measures were enforced, and officers implicated in the corruption were either reassigned or discharged. The base was slowly rebuilding its reputation. Yet, Jasmine's personal journey was more complicated. The very institution she had fought to protect now felt uncertain. Her trust in the system had been shaken. Offers of permanent positions and promotions came, but she hesitated. Was this the place for her future? Mitch Alvarez remained a constant source of support, reminding her that sometimes change begins with one person willing to stand alone. "You lit a fire that won't go out," he said during one late-night phone call. "That's rare." Despite the challenges, Jasmine found moments of quiet strength. She reconnected with friends outside the military world, took long walks to clear her mind, and allowed herself brief respites from the storm. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, General Nolan visited her quietly at the base. "You did more than just expose corruption," he said. "You restored faith, not just here, but across the service." Jasmine nodded, a mix of pride and weariness in her eyes. She knew the fight for justice was ongoing, but she was ready to face whatever came next. Her journey had transformed her from a dismissed contractor to a symbol of resilience. The price had been high, but the reward was greater. The knowledge that standing up for what's right can change even the most entrenched systems. And that was a battle worth fighting. Months had passed since Jasmine Vega stood before the Congressional Committee, her testimony sparking reforms across the military. Yet the victory came with a heavy toll. While the public praised her courage, Jasmine grappled with the personal cost of her fight. She found herself a target, not just of whispers and threats, but of isolation. Former colleagues, who once greeted her warmly, now avoided her gaze. Invitations to meetings dwindled. The very institution she fought to protect seemed unsure whether to embrace or reject her. The promotions and permanent positions offered by the military felt hollow. Jasmine knew accepting them would mean navigating a system still wary of her voice. She declined, choosing instead to carve her own path away from Fort Monroe. Legal battles lingered, draining her emotionally and financially. The officers she helped expose retaliated through lawsuits and character attacks. Friends cautioned her to walk away, to protect her peace. But Jasmine refused to be silenced. General Nolan remained her steadfast ally. In private conversations, he acknowledged the broken trust. "The system is flawed," he admitted. "But people like you are what keep it alive." Jasmine's nights were restless. Memories of threats and betrayal haunted her dreams. Yet, through it all, she held on to the belief that truth was worth the price. Her family and friends became her anchor. They reminded her who she was beyond the scandal, an intelligent, brave woman who dared to stand alone. Outside the military world, Jasmine began speaking at conferences and advocacy groups, sharing her story to inspire others facing injustice. Her voice reached far beyond Fort Monroe, touching lives and encouraging change. Still, the scars remained. Jasmine often wondered if she had lost a part of herself in the battle. The trust, the sense of belonging, the simple peace of doing her job without fear. One quiet afternoon, sitting on a park bench, she watched children playing freely, their laughter a reminder of innocence lost and regained. She realized that her fight wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about reclaiming her dignity. When General Nolan met her for one final time on the base, his words carried weight. "You weren't invisible," he said softly. "Some of us saw you, and now so will others." Jasmine smiled, a mix of relief and resolve. She was leaving behind more than a job. She was stepping into a new chapter 1, defined by strength, resilience, and hope. Though the price had been high, the truth she uncovered was priceless. The day Jasmine Vega walked out of Fort Monroe for the last time was quiet but profound. Months of turmoil, battles fought in courtrooms and boardrooms, and sleepless nights had brought her here to the very gate that once barred her entry. Now, it stood as a symbol of a chapter closing and a new journey beginning. General Richard. Nolan waited by the entrance, a rare softness in his stern eyes. "You weren't invisible to me," he said quietly, extending a hand. Jasmine shook it firmly, feeling the weight of his respect. "You showed courage that few possess." Jasmine's heart swelled with a bittersweet mix of pride and sadness. She had fought to protect the integrity of the base and its people, but the scars ran deep. The trust she once had in the institution had been shaken, perhaps forever altered. Still, she knew her fight mattered. "I didn't do it for recognition," Jasmine said. "I did it because it was right. Because silence would have made me complicit." Nolan nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "You changed the culture here. What you started will continue. Others will stand where you once stood." As she turned to leave, Jasmine paused and looked back at the sprawling base. The rows of barracks, the bustling operations center, the flag flying high against the sky, it was all part of her story now. A story of resilience, truth, and unwavering integrity. Outside the base, the world was waiting. Jasmine had already been contacted by organizations dedicated to protecting whistleblowers and advocating for military reform. Speaking engagements, consulting roles, and writing opportunities beckoned. Her voice, once silenced, was now powerful and in demand. But Jasmine also sought peace. The journey had been exhausting, and she longed for time to heal, to reconnect with family and friends who had stood by her. She planned to travel, explore new paths, and find joy in life beyond the military's shadow. The lessons she carried were clear. Standing up for what's right isn't easy. It requires sacrifice, courage, and sometimes walking away when the fight has been won. But the wounds remained as Jasmine walked down the road leading away from Fort Monroe. She felt lighter. The burden of injustice no longer weighed her down. Instead, hope filled her chest, a hope that one day, truth and integrity would always prevail. Her story was a beacon for those who faced impossible odds, a reminder that even when kicked off the base, the bravest don't give up. They rise stronger. And so, Jasmine Vega stepped into the future, unbroken, unapologetic, and ready to make a difference on her own terms.